I'm the product manager for emerging identifiers at Bowker. Prior to that, I was at Firebrand, and prior to that, I was a consultant. And a long time ago, I was at barnesandnoble.com running their database. In 1998, Barnes & Noble had 900,000 titles in its database for sale. And we were very excited because we were going to reach 1 million. Today, the number of active ISBNs in books in print is roughly 32.8 million. There are some caveats to this. Some of these ISBNs don't represent viable products. Some are assigned to chapters rather than whole books. But when you take into account the fact that there's a sizable number of books via Smashwords, Kindle, other platforms that never make it into books in print, we're looking at roughly a 3,646% increase of titles available over the last 14 years. This is what Brian O'Leary was referring to last year when he talked about the opportunity in abundance, which is also a threat, of course. So God forbid we should print all of these books on paper. 32.8 million ISBNs means roughly 25,000 tons of paper, which is equivalent to 3,000 African elephants if only one copy per ISBN were printed. With this many books, making all that content available in a scalable way means, obviously, ebooks take on an increasing importance. And if Brian was right 2 years ago, and he is, and oh my God, it was just 2 years ago when he said it, we're not so terribly slowly approaching a world of fundamentally containerless content, where the content is born digitally. It can be produced and consumed rapidly, which is why there's so much of it, and why there's only going to be more of it. Lots and lots of information and entertainment, lots and lots of essentially data. And that data can and will be packaged and sold on paper, but increasingly paper is being regarded as a temporary medium. How many people in this audience have kids? Okay. So when your kids' teachers were communicating with you about things like field trips and assemblies and after-school programs, they send home a piece of paper in the backpack, right? How many of you have missed knowing about a field trip, assembly, or after-school program because that piece of paper is buried in the backpack? My stepdaughter is autistic, and she has a compulsion to rip paper, so her father never sees his notices, ever. This is changing. Increasingly, teachers are communicating via email and the school website because they've seen that paper cannot be relied upon in the same way that digital communication can. So paper books aren't going away, but if you welcome 3,000 elephants worth of paper in your living room, even if you're pervy for paper, as Cory Doctorow says, when was the last time you ordered a book from a paper catalog? Or anything from a paper catalog? Nothing ever goes away anymore either. The internet provides a persistence even to physical objects. I had these sneakers when I was 16. I was stylish. I wore them out to the point where I had to tape the soles, and obviously the question would be why not get another pair? They stopped making them shortly after I bought them, so it was impossible to replace them in 1981. But now, in 2012, I can order them from a vintage sneaker website. I can order a replacement for a dollhouse that got lost in our family's move from Upper Montclair, New Jersey to Seaford, Delaware. At the time, in 1971, roughly around, well, Pablo, how old are you? I was going to say around the time Pablo was born, but actually, no. There was no way to replace this dollhouse, and I spent years of my life grieving for this lost toy. Now I can order it on eBay. With the web, nothing goes away. It only accumulates. It accumulates and accumulates, and books are very much a part of this accumulation. As I said before, we don't order books out of paper catalogs anymore unless you're a kid with your Scholastic Book Club order form. Those are still around, but it's not like your parents ever see that form anyway because it's been shredded to powder and is at the bottom of your backpack along with pirate booty and gum wrappers. We order books off the web. Increasingly, we order books that are websites, packed into containers. And now we have almost 33 million to choose from. We order music and movies, and we don't see a physical medium for most of these things. Physical media gets scratched, damaged, lost, borrowed, never returned. But the web is forever, and there's a lot of it. And this is not news. We've been talking about this for a couple of years now, and still, especially within publishing houses, books are regarded as separate objects from all other objects with their own rules and their own special book metadata. Let's everyone focus on book metadata for discoverability like it's a project. We'll pay attention to book metadata till we get it down pat and we're good at churning out Onyx files that don't get rejected, or until we figure out what Apple really wants in a spreadsheet. Well, that's lovely and worthy as a goal, but at a rate of increase of 36,000% over 14 years, I'd argue that the publishers who are thinking in this very linear way might as well be chiseling books in stone tablets, because that kind of thinking is inadequate to the environment we're in and, barring apocalypse, will be in forever. So our container. I live on Staten Island. It's a working port. I see a lot of these. And I also want to set the stage for Hugh and Balder a little bit. We keep hearing that an EPUB file is essentially just a website in a box. It's bounded artificially by a container, literally the OCF file, which specifies how the file is going to be structured and zipped up. It's the covers and the saddle stitching and the table of contents in the book so that the book can easily be traded and rendered on devices. But the book itself, the pages, are just a very long HTML file, as Adam demonstrated. A web page, as John was saying, which search engines can crawl if the web page is on the open web, or ingest if you send it to them to index. But at some point, the container opens, as all containers do. I don't know of a single container in the history of opposable thumbs that has remained closed. And at some point, remember, we're in a world of rapid development, explosion of content, and ever more sophisticated ways of consuming it. So at some point, could happen at any time. Search engines and online catalogs go one step further than asking publishers and other manufacturers for product metadata in a separate, e.g. Onyx feed. They're increasingly going to want to derive that metadata and more detailed metadata directly from the file representing the product itself. But as we know from our experiences with Onyx, search engines are only as good as the information they have to work with. An engine operating by itself is not going to go anywhere. It needs friction. It needs something to operate on. And for a search engine, a big mess of data is that thing. This means that publishers are not only going to have to get good at creating and maintaining metadata at a pace that can sustain a 3,600% increase over 14 years, which means vastly more products to keep track of, they're going to have to get good at doing this inside the book file itself, which means not only grappling with XML, which is a difficult enough message to get across when Brian and I first began preaching that gospel, but concepts that they've never thought of before, like a book as a web page. And at volumes that are unprecedented because A, publishing is easier than it's ever been before, and B, no book published now ever goes away. This kind of rapid development doesn't just change your workflow, it changes what and how you publish. And the more publishers understand about the web, the more likely they are, of course, to survive. I'll get back to what this screenshot is of in a minute, but I want to make the point that's obvious to many of us here, but is nonetheless a point that needs to be hammered home after we disperse and go back to the real world. This is a different kind of survival than just holding on through a bad time and waiting out an economic downturn. This is a survival that depends on evolution, on change, on new skills and abilities and ways of looking at things while keeping in mind where we have come from and how we got here. So let's go back to the problem of an abundance of containerless content. How are we going to manage it? How are we going to organize it, feed the search engines in ways they understand so normal people who think Google is magic can actually find it, discern it, and read it, and because we're in the US, work out cash for it? We impose a structure on it. We take that mess and we organize the hell out of it. Why us? Why the book industry? Because the search engine industry doesn't really care what they display. Books are no more important to a search engine than anything else. It's all data. If we want to make the search engine work for us, we have to engage it. We have to understand how it searches and what's effective on it. Just as the industry worked very hard in the 1990s to understand superstores and how they displayed books and what co-op could get us, so what must we understand the new storefront, which is search. The search engines are not going to do this work for us. Like I said, they don't care whether they display books or blogs in a search result about Indian cooking. It's all just information to them. There are 32 million active ISBNs today. There are somewhere between 100 and 200 million active websites. There are some 650 million registered domain names, but most of those don't turn into websites. This is what book merchandising is up against, to say nothing of competition from other forms of entertainment. In an age of this much abundance, it's not enough to simply create a thing and then offer it for sale on the web. We have to understand how the market works, and the market revolves around search. Okay, we're going to go back to our schema. Richard Wallace, who is at OCLC, he's the Chief Technology Evangelist at OCLC, who is very, very involved with schema.org and leading an effort to create a set of tags for books. And I wanted to show you what they're working on. This is a collection of metadata tags. They're organized by the type of thing that they describe. So the one for book, we can see, is actually pretty small. It just has a few tags here. It's going to grow. We're working on it. We're describing the book in ways that search engines can understand and appreciate. And this is a project that is being participated in by Google, Yahoo, Bing, and Yandex. So it's a bunch of book people who are talking to a bunch of search engine people. That actual direct conversation is happening, and we're meeting fairly regularly to have these conversations. When we look at the schema for a product, we see a lot more familiar tags here. Provider, publisher, reviews, copyright. It looks kind of onyxy. So this is great. We have metadata. This is just one of a number of different schemas that search engines are using in their indexes. For those of you who don't know, the search engine index is the data that gets crawled and stored. Most of the outrage around Google book search involved the fact that Google was scanning and ingesting books into their index regardless of copyright status, even though they were only going to display fair use snippets from the books. The fact that they didn't ask for permission before doing this caused a lot of outrage. Some of this litigation right now is ongoing and some is settled. Meanwhile, publishers are sending their books to Google for inclusion in their index. So this metadata in these schemas is used by search engines to help prioritize and direct search. And the rich snippets off to the side are heavily reliant on this metadata. It comes in a number of different formats. Google recognizes pretty much all of them. What these tags do is they give websites an added authoritativeness and uniqueness, attributes, of course, that search engines prioritize highly. Best Buy has been active in semantic web coding, because that's what this is, for a few years, but most recently they used an ontology called good relations within the schema.org product syntax. Basically, that means they used a publicly available set of terms that have been commonly agreed upon by search engines. And they report that pages have been marked up like this, have experienced visits a couple 100% more frequently than those without the markup, because they get highlighted in that rich snippets. They showed up in search, and when people found the products, they bought them, and Best Buy has reported a significant increase in sales as a result. Okay. So, returning to the idea of a book as a website, Schema.org, as I said, is currently working on representing books for the web for discoverability, but the next natural step is to represent the concepts the books are talking about and to link those to other concepts. Basically, by opening the book, by shucking the container and making the content actionable on the web, books become APIs to other books. You can link to other books within that book. You can categorize ideas and characters. You can tag dates and locations. And if you're using an agreed-upon ontology to do this, you can build bridges to other books about the same things with related ideas. You can link to websites that update information more frequently than a book can. And this is the real power of books in browsers. They literally become almost infinite. And in an age of containerless, abundant, persistent content, the only way to instill any sense of order on this information overload is by creating links in it. I guess, do we have time for questions? No? No? Yeah? Oh, thank you.